all seeing this? We're gonna be so rich. Wait, Tyler, where's that? Well, hello, little friend.
James, what up? James?
This video is sponsored by Bad Voice Acting and my Twitter account. Seriously, I'd love to connect with you all there, so go on Twitter. So yeah, like Prometheus, this isn't a sci-fi movie involving xenomorphs, but it is a video on how I did the egg and the facehugger shot using mostly free software that anyone can grab. I'm a huge sci-fi geek, but I still can't come up with anything scarier to me than this thing, so let's get on an express elevator to hell. I started in Blender because I needed to make an egg. It all starts with the egg, or is it the queen? I don't know, because they keep changing it for years. Sulaco, Alien 3, hello? Anyway, I went into Blender, took the default cube, subdivided it, applied the subdivision modifier, and deleted 3/4 of it. Then I just modeled the egg shape by moving points and edges and polys around a bit. There's no right or wrong way to do this, so just chill. I went into the top area and pulled those polys around to form the place where the egg opens up. If I'd left it where it was, then I'd put it all back together again and it would be for nothing. See, when I add the mirror modifier now, it's separate and is the start of the 4 petals that I need to peel back later. When I mirror that again to the other side, it holds up. Cool. Then I applied it all and threw a subdivision modifier on it and worked on it more to get it into the shape I wanted. Now it was a bit squared off, so I went in and I used a cool add-on called Loop Tools to make the selections of the circumference into a circle. It just looks more eggy, like that's a word. It's in the dictionary on the internet, so it's true. As you can tell, it's very thin, so I added a solidify modifier to this, and yeah, now it can host some sick deathy stuff inside it. And now I molded it more into the shape I wanted. I was good to go, so I went into sculpting mode and roughed it up a bit. There are so many variations of these things in the different movies and the comics that I felt like doing my own, and you can too. To make an egg work, you need to rig it. If you don't rig it, you can probably use morph targets, but I like bones as they are a bit easier to control. It's a me thing. I rotated this 45 degrees and went ahead and modeled the armature in. I drew bones up and around it with a few in the petals so that I could get the correct peeling effect. Once I'd parented it with Control P and chose automatic weights, I tested it out and was pleasantly surprised. Now I scaled the whole thing down because it was huge. Seriously, the ones in the first movie seem a bit smaller than the second one in the hive. Either that or Sigourney Weaver is really small. I don't know or really care because it's all awesome and it still gives me nightmares. I'm seriously going to buy James Cameron's Masterclass. Have any of you seen that? I know one guy who worked with him and didn't get yelled at, so it's all good. So I started modeling the facehugger. I started with a box and cut it up and extruded things out. I know in this scene that it's going to be mostly hidden inside the egg and relatively far from the camera. And I was the director here, so I was going to give it just enough detail to hold up and then yell at myself later. So box modeling works here. I know everyone loves to sculpt and whatever. I like doing it this way. There's a good secret for you. They all work in the end as long as the topology works at the animation and render time. Don't get hung up on stupid arguments. I'm not a team here, so I can get away with doing this way. It's all relative to your own environment and needs, and if you're on a team, work for the team. Modeling. I decided I hated the legs I extruded, so I cut them off, and I went with a cylinder with the correct number of vertices as the holes I'd had left. After moving it roughly into place, I modeled with the better and rounder geometry. I used the knife tool to divide the end caps and then modeled out the tips by just pulling out the edges. Now I went in and attached the leg to the main body using the merge tool. This only works if you join the geometry pieces together. In this case, I did that by selecting the new leg and the body and hitting Ctrl J. That allows you to merge points in edit mode because it's now the same object. After I knew it was going to work, I pulled it off and duplicated the others. You might notice too that the legs have knuckles. All I did for that was add some edge loops in and then scaled up the middle for the joints. Once I had the legs in place, I attached them using merge. These things have fingernails, so I extruded out some fingernails, making sure they had cuticles because that's important for facehuggers. Yay! Now I mirrored it. Awesome. It totally needs more work. So I kept pushing and pulling and shaping. Now I need the underside. I go down there and push and pull some more. Right now it was all about blocking it out. The better the blocking, the easier it is later to add in the details. Now I can extrude in and build out the orifice. This thing has no gender. It's evolved beyond that. So I kept going until I got the shapes down, then modeled out where the proboscis goes. That's the thing that makes the magic happen, if you haven't seen the movie. There, I made the proboscis. It's not going to extrude too far in this shot, so I'm not worrying about it. If I made this for the storyboard that needed it, I'd have built the whole thing out and rigged the whole thing, but I didn't need that here, so I didn't do it. Now I went in and detailed some more to get the shape going better. I also got rid of the nasty normals issue here where the legs were attached to the body by recalculating the normals. That fixed it. I added some detail, but I hated it, so I detailed it and built out a new tail. All facehuggers need rigs to move, so I rigged it. I really go into rigging in the Meat Monster video linked above way more, so I'll gloss over it here as I pretty much use the same rig. I basically drew out some center bones, then drew out the leg bones, tail bones, and ones for the respirator sacs. Next, I went in and painted the weights. They didn't come in well at all, so I needed to spend some time doing this. It's a pain, but having one of these things attack you is worse, so it's all a matter of perspective, right? Once I'd finished the weight painting, I tested out the rig and cool, this will work. I'm not going to worry about IK here as I did in the Meat Monster video and subsequent Patreon rig video. I got away without it, and I'll show you how soon. Now, I curled this little ray of sunshine up and stuffed him into his home, nice and snug. Then I worked on the egg petals. The cool thing that you can do in most animation software, Blender included, is you can save poses for your bones. I did this here to make a closed state and an open state for the egg. This will allow me to keyframe just 2 keyframes and let the magic of computers do the rest for me. Amazing, right? So set a pose in the closed state and call it closed. Then open up Pandora's box and save an open state and call it open. I now use the poses to set keyframes on the whole character, one with closed and one with open further down the timeline. There, it worked, and I was happy. Now that I'd had the egg opening up, it was time to animate the facehugger. Normally, I'd set a whole IK rig system to make things easier, or if I were working with a team and handing it off to the animator, but I did neither on this, so I decided to hand animate it and see if I can get something I like. I rotated it, moved it, and set a bunch of keyframes using whole character to block it out. Then I went in and refined it. There's really no other way to do it other than practice. Once I did something I liked, after about an hour of playing around, I was happy. Here's where I broke with convention, and did all the modeling, rigging, and animating before the texturing. I really didn't care as I knew I could unwrap this stuff and shade it later, so that's what I did. Here I'd selected the whole egg and did a spherical projection on it. I could have dealt with seams and islands and such, but I wanted to feel it out first. So I did a simple projection and used Blender's paint tools to paint on it and see if I can go further. It turns out that I didn't really need to do some crazy islands and all that projection, so I saved out the image. I brought it into Affinity Photo, which I love, and painted some textures. I grabbed a leather texture and added it because Kane said it was leathery, and Kane knew because he was there. I also grabbed a foam texture from cc0textures.com and put it where the inside would be. Then I pinked it. It always looked like a foamy blood vessel mess to me, and the camera will be far away enough, so I thought it might work. Once I brought the texture back into Blender and applied it to the principled shader, it worked. I added some 3-point lighting to this and, not bad. I ended up selecting the whole inside of this and assigning it a different shader than the outside. There would be a whole lot more subsurface scattering on the inside, so I wanted to have 2 shaders on this, so I did that. Now I played with the displacement levels and subsurface scattering until I was happy. This was getting me excited, as I was using Cycles X or Cycles 10 build for this, and it was fast on my machine. Now I went in to give our little friend a shader. I'd have loved to texture him, but he's so far away that I was able to get away with just some basic shading on this one. It'd be really nice to have these really nicely textured assets, but really, like, for what? Aside from fan art, there's really no other use for this than this video, so I just went with that. Now, all eggs in all the movies seem to have these tendrils sticking out of the bottom. Maybe they're to sense when hosts are near, or maybe they're just for a balance. No, they're there because the designers thought they looked cool. That's it. So I drew out some curves using a technique I show in this video, and tapered the ends using another curve. Great, I had it and it worked. Now I can have some fun. I went into Houdini and I made some slime. It's up on Patreon in the Houdini tier if you want to see how I made that. You can probably do something with geometry nodes, but it's not quite there yet. I use Houdini because I have it and it's just easier for me at this point. I shaded it with a principled shader that had some transparency and cool, it was looking nice and goopy. I made a floor and grabbed a PBR texture for a rock. It was inspired by Out of the Shadows, Echo, and Phalanx for this one. Echo is the book that has a hive set up in a cave, so I figured I'd go with a cave rather than modeling out a spaceship that's been done to death. I copied the eggs around, and being that only one opens up, I killed off the armatures in the others. Then I'd scattered and rotated them around the cave floor. I also made walls out of spheres. I go into doing that in this video above on making caves if you're interested. It's really just displacing spheres with a displace modifier using the world coordinate space and moving them around. Once I had the cave built, I wanted slime on the walls, so I took it into Houdini and quickly made slimy walls. That's up on Patreon too if you want. It's kind of just too much for YouTube. Then I brought it back into Blender and gave it a slimy shader, and I gave the walls a PBR texture for rock, and voila. Oh, and I thought some dry ice looking fog on the floor might be cool too, so I brought it back into Houdini, then back into Blender. It made the cut, but I really tuned it down a bit, so it's not that important here. Lastly, I take the same particle file from the skulls video linked here, appended it to this scene, and rendered it. And once I'd comped this all in Resolve and added some color correcting, I made a simple low orbit establishing shot. Here it is.
Y'all seeing this? We're gonna be so rich. Wait, what's happening? What is that? Well, hello, little friend.
Perfect? No, but whatever. These egg things would be mostly done with awesome practical effects anyway. This is a process, and it's ever evolving, so subscribe and evolve with me. Thanks for watching, and have some awesome dreams.